The walls of the house had always been thick, but lately they felt alive, as if they carried sound better than wood or brick should. Somaiya moved through the rooms quietly, trying not to disturb anyone, but even her silence seemed to have its own echo. Conversations would stop when she entered. Doors would close halfway, leaving half-seen shadows and half-heard threats drifting like cold air. She wasn't naive. She knew tension. She had seen it build slowly, like water filling a locked room. But this time the water felt deeper, rising faster, reaching places she had never imagined it could reach. When she lay awake at night, she could hear muffled arguments downstairs, voices that tried to hide truth, but failed every time they slipped into anger. Her name wasn't always mentioned, but she felt it. She felt herself becoming the center of a storm she couldn't define. Her diary became her only refuge, pages filled with half-sentences, half-thoughts. Why do they speak as if I'm not here? Why do they plan things that don't include my future? Why does fear feel familiar now? She wasn't scared yet, just unsettled, just alert, just waking up to the possibility that the life she thought she understood was slowly twisting itself into something unrecognizable. Somaiya's childhood wasn't marked by outright neglect, but by a quiet, persistent indifference. She was a ghost in her own home, a background character in a story that wasn't about her. Her earliest memories were of watching other children play from her window, their laughter, a language she didn't speak. Her parents were there, physically, but their attention was always elsewhere, caught in the intricate web of community expectations and family politics. She learned to be self-sufficient early on, mastering the art of invisibility. She would read for hours, losing herself in worlds where heroines were seen, heard, and valued. These books were not just an escape. They were her first teachers, showing her that a different kind of life was possible, a life where one's voice mattered. She clung to these stories, these whispers of a world beyond her silent house, and they planted a seed of resilience within her, a quiet determination to one day write her own narrative. Her education was the one area where she was allowed a semblance of freedom, but it was a calculated allowance. For her family, a daughter's education was a mark of status, a jewel to be displayed, not a tool for her own empowerment. Somaiya, however, saw it differently. The school library became her sanctuary, a fortress of knowledge where she could arm herself. She excelled, not for praise, which rarely came, but for the sheer joy of learning. Each fact she learned, each equation she solved, felt like another brick in the wall she was building around herself, a defense against the encroaching silence at home. Her teachers saw a bright, withdrawn student, but they couldn't see the fierce battle being waged within her. She dreamed of a career, not for money or prestige, but for independence. A job meant a life of her own, a door she could close that no one else had a key to. This dream was a secret she guarded fiercely, a flickering candle in the suffocating darkness of her family's expectations. Life for Somaiya was a tightrope walk over a chasm of unspoken rules. She was expected to be dutiful, obedient, and above all, silent. Her desires, her opinions, her very essence were to be suppressed. The house was a stage, and she was given a script she had not written. Any deviation was met with cold glares and a tightening of the invisible leash. She watched her friends talk about their futures, their loves, their travels, and a profound sense of isolation would wash over her. Her life felt predetermined, a path laid out by others, leading to a destination she did not choose. The constant pressure to conform was exhausting. It was a slow erosion of her spirit, a daily battle to hold on to the person she knew she was inside. Yet, within this suffocating environment, her will to survive, to be free, did not die. It simply went underground, growing stronger in the dark, waiting for the right moment to break through the surface. The whispers in the house grew louder, more urgent. The tension was no longer a gentle hum, but a screeching alarm that only she seemed to hear. Her struggle was no longer just about preserving her identity. It was about survival. One evening, she overheard a fragment of a conversation, a plan involving a distant relative, a one-way ticket, and a future she would not control. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The walls weren't just whispering warnings. They were closing in. This was the moment her years of silent preparation had led to. The books she read, the knowledge she gained, the resilience she built, it was all for this. The fear was real, a cold knot in her stomach, but beneath it was a flicker of something else. Defiance. She would not be a pawn in their game. She would not let them erase her. That night, the quiet, observant girl began to plot her own escape, turning her struggle from a passive resistance into an active rebellion. The plan was audacious, born of desperation and fueled by years of suppressed dreams. Using the savings she had secretly amassed from tutoring, a small act of defiance her family had overlooked, Somaiya began to lay the groundwork for her escape. Her academic excellence had earned her a scholarship to a university in a different city, an offer she had hidden, knowing it was her only way out. The career she had dreamed of was no longer a distant fantasy. It was a lifeline. She meticulously planned every detail, her mind sharp and focused. The night she left, the house was still, wrapped in the same deceptive silence it had always held. She moved like a shadow, carrying only a small bag and the weight of her entire past. Stepping out into the night, she didn't look back. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a new, exhilarating feeling: freedom. The world was vast and unknown, but for the first time, it was hers to discover. Her new life was a stark contrast to the old. The silence of her university dorm was a peaceful one, not an oppressive one. For the first time, she could breathe. But freedom came with its own challenges. She was alone, navigating a world she had only read about in books. The struggle for financial independence was real, and she juggled her demanding studies with part-time jobs. There were moments of doubt, moments when the loneliness felt overwhelming, but then she would remember the cold, silent walls of her home, and her resolve would harden. She was not just building a career. She was building a life from scratch. She made friends, people who valued her for her thoughts and her laughter, not for her obedience. She discovered her own voice, and to her surprise, people wanted to hear it. Each day was a victory, a testament to her strength. The scars of her past remained, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of how far she had come. Success for Somaiya was not a destination but a journey. It wasn't about the degree she earned or the successful career she built as a writer, though she achieved both. Her true success was in the reclamation of her own story. She began to write, not just for her job, but for herself. She wrote about the silent girl in the house with the whispering walls, not with bitterness, but with compassion. She wrote about the strength it takes to break free from invisible chains, and the courage it takes to build a life on one's own terms. Her stories resonated with countless others who felt unseen and unheard, creating a community of shared experience. She became a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope for those trapped in silence. Her success was in transforming her pain into power, her struggle into a source of strength for others. She had not just escaped her past. She had reshaped it into a powerful narrative of resilience and liberation. Somaiya's legacy is not written in stone monuments, but in the lives she touched. It lives in the young woman who, after reading her story, found the courage to pursue her own education against her family's wishes. It echoes in the quiet student who finally speaks up in class, inspired by her journey. Her legacy is a testament to the fact that one small act of defiance can ignite a revolution of the self. She proved that the walls we are confined by, whether physical or emotional, are only as strong as we allow them to be. Her life became a powerful message. Your story is yours to write, your voice is yours to use, and your future is yours to claim. She never sought to be a hero, only to be free. But in freeing herself, she created a path for others to follow, a legacy of empowerment that would ripple through generations. She transformed the silence that was meant to erase her into a powerful symphony of hope, resilience, and unyielding strength. The most profound truths often begin as whispers, subtle shifts in the atmosphere that we might dismiss as imagination. They are the quiet alarms that our intuition sounds when the world around us begins to warp, when the foundations we thought were solid start to feel like sand. We often ignore these initial warnings, choosing the comfort of familiarity over the discomfort of a threatening unknown. We convince ourselves that the closing doors, the hushed conversations, the feeling of being watched are all in our heads. But true strength is not found in ignoring the storm. It is found in having the courage to acknowledge the first drop of rain. It is about trusting that deep primal instinct that tells you something is wrong, even when you can't yet name it. The moment you stop questioning your own perception and start listening to the warnings from within is the moment you take back your power. It is the first critical step away from being a victim of circumstances and toward becoming the architect of your own survival, proving that awareness is not paranoia. It is the beginning of liberation. The morning light looked different now, colder, thinner, filtered through a layer of unease that never used to exist. I sat by the window with a notebook open in front of me, pretending to study, pretending to be the same person I was a few weeks ago. But inside, something had shifted. The whispers from the house, the secretive stares, the quiet phone calls, they clung to my mind like a fog it couldn't brush away. People around me acted normal to normal. Forced smiles, polite questions, carefully measured words. It was as if everyone had agreed to play a part in a scene I wasn't invited to understand. I watched them closely now, noticing details I once ignored, the way a conversation paused when I walked in, the way someone's hand tightened around a phone, the way another person avoided my eyes entirely. I told myself not to overthink. I told myself to breathe. I told myself nothing was wrong. But deep down, the truth pressed harder every day. Someone had made a decision about my life without my consent. The pressure built slowly, turning into an ache I carried everywhere through hallways, across streets, into classrooms, where the world felt completely separate from the storm brewing at home. My friends could sense I wasn't the same, but I brushed off their questions with practiced ease. "I'm fine," I would say. "Just tired. Just stressed." They believed me. Or maybe they didn't, but no one pushed. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled upon a message from an unknown number. A message that wasn't meant for me, but was somehow sent to me by mistake. The words were short, coded, but chillingly familiar. "Everything is ready. Just confirm." I gripped the phone so tightly, my hands trembled. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Ready for what? Confirm what? Why did the message sound like a step in a plan already in motion? I stared at the screen until it dimmed, but the words kept burning into my thoughts. I wanted to show someone. I wanted to ask someone. But the fear of who might be watching, who might be waiting for my reaction, kept me silent. That night, I didn't sit by the window. I didn't write in my diary. I locked my door, sat quietly in the dark, and listened. Footsteps moved down the hallway. Someone paused outside my room. A faint breath, barely audible. And then a slow retreat. My heart clenched, not in panic, but in confirmation. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't a coincidence. Something was happening, and I was running out of time to understand it. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the air itself was thickening around me. Every sound seemed amplified: doors shutting, phones buzzing, quiet footsteps on the stairs. I had always been observant, but now I watched everything with the intensity of someone trying to read danger in the smallest movements. My instincts whispered one thing over and over: something is coming. On a cold afternoon, while I walked home from class, My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail, not a message. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the hesitant tone in the brief, shaky recording. Be careful. They're not telling you everything. Just 7 words. 7 words that felt like someone pulling back a curtain for a split second and then dropping it again. I replayed it 3 times, each time feeling the same cold shiver settle in my spine. I looked around the street, ordinary houses, ordinary cars, ordinary birds perched on telephone wires. Nothing looked dangerous, but the warning had already implanted itself deep inside me. I saved the recording, but I didn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't want help, but because I didn't know who could be trusted anymore. That evening, the house felt unusually quiet, too quiet. I walked through the hallway, my footsteps soft, careful. When I reached the living room, I saw something that made me pause. A stack of documents on the table, partially covered by a magazine. Names, dates, locations. And my name printed at the top of one of the pages. I froze. My pulse fluttered. I reached forward slowly and lifted the corner of the paper. The details weren't fully clear, blurred copies, scribbled notes, something that looked like travel information, something that looked like an official form. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I heard footsteps behind me and quickly slid the papers back into place. I stepped away just as someone entered the room, their eyes scanning me with a look that made my chest tighten, not warm, not concerned, but watchful. "You need anything?" the voice asked. "No," I replied, too fast. "Just looking for a charger." A brief nod, a longer stare, and then they walked away. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, even after I reached my room. I sat on my bed, gripping the covers, trying to process what I had seen. The documents weren't random. They were connected, and they were connected to me. Hours later, when the house was asleep, I opened my window to let in the cold night air, hoping it would calm me. Instead, I heard a quiet argument outside, 2 voices, low and urgent. "She's getting suspicious. Just keep her calm, for now." My heart clenched. The warning was real. The danger was real. And whatever was happening around me, it was getting closer, tightening like a rope I could feel, but couldn't see. For the first time, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just fear. This wasn't just paranoia. This was a countdown, and I had no idea how much time was left. The tension in the house had stopped hiding. It no longer whispered from behind doors or drifted through half-finished conversations. Now it walked openly beside me, breathing down my neck, creeping into every corner of my day. I started noticing patterns, tiny details that meant nothing alone, but everything together. A door that used to stay open was now always locked. A family member who never cared about my schedule suddenly asked where I was at all hours. A second phone, a phone I had never seen before, kept ringing in another room, always followed by hurried whispers and a door closing sharply. I wasn't imagining it. Something was being arranged, something involving me. One evening, I caught sight of an envelope being hurriedly tucked away in a drawer. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I saw just enough, the corner of a document, my initials, a government stamp I didn't recognize. I walked away slowly, pretending I hadn't noticed, but inside my heartbeat was pounding, demanding answers I wasn't ready to face. At night, I tried searching online for clues, for explanations, for anything that resembled what I was experiencing. But every answer only led to more questions. Every warning I found felt a little too close to home. And still, I couldn't tell anyone, not teachers, not friends, not neighbors. What if telling the wrong person made everything worse? One cold night, as I stood near the kitchen to get water, I overheard something more explicit than anything I had heard before. 2 voices arguing, tense, rushed. "We can't delay anymore. She'll find out she already suspects something. Then keep her quiet. Just act normal." I am acting normal. A pause. A deep breath. A chilling sentence. After next week, it won't matter. I almost dropped the glass. The words hit me like ice water, pouring straight into my chest. After next week? What wouldn't matter? What were they planning? Why was I the subject of every murmured conversation? I stepped away before they saw me, slipping back into my room, my breaths quick and unsteady. I pressed my back against the door, sliding down to the floor. My hands shook violently, as if my body already understood what my mind couldn't fully process. I realized then that I wasn't in the middle of a misunderstanding. I was in the middle of a plan. A plan I hadn't agreed to. A plan I wasn't supposed to know about. A plan that involved taking control of my future, my choices, my life. The trap wasn't being set around me. It was already set. I was already inside it. All that remained was the moment someone decided to close it. And that moment, I feared, was coming faster than I could prepare for. The morning began like any other, quiet, cold, ordinary. But beneath the surface of routine, something felt wrong. The air carried an uneasiness that I couldn't shake off, as if the world had shifted slightly overnight, and I was the only one who noticed. The house was too calm, too controlled. People spoke softly, their movements rehearsed, their smiles thin and tight like stretched paper. I pretended not to see it. They pretended nothing was happening, and the silence between them became its own conversation. While I sat at the small dining table, I noticed a look exchanged over my head, brief, sharp, weighted. A look that wasn't meant for me, but meant about me. The kind that confirmed every fear I'd tried to outrun. They were waiting for something, for someone, for a moment. I stirred my tea slowly, hiding the tremor in my hands. My eyes drifted to the hallway, where a suitcase sat partly zipped, as if someone had been packing quietly, carefully, not openly, not boldly, but with caution. That suitcase wasn't new. But the reason it was out, that was new. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. Later that afternoon, footsteps echoed in the corridor, heavier than usual, purposeful. A door opened, then shut softly. I leaned closer, lurking near the stairwell. The conversation below was muffled, but I could make out pieces. She won't see it coming. Everything is ready. Just get her out of the house. My breath caught. My heartbeat stumbled. My instincts screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go, not yet. Not without understanding what, exactly, I was running from. I pressed a hand to my chest, grounding myself, trying to steady the panic starting to claw at me. By evening, the atmosphere had thickened to the point of suffocation. Every whisper felt sharper, every glance heavier. A strange car slowed outside the house, its engine rumbling before it drove away again. Twice, 3 times. As if someone was circling, checking, waiting for a signal. At dinner, no one looked me in the eye. The food tasted bland, untouched, just something placed on the table to preserve the illusion of normalcy. But the illusion was cracking. I could feel it. Something was about to break. When I went upstairs to my room, I noticed my window was slightly open, not how I had left it. My chest tightened. I stepped inside cautiously and found something lying on my desk. A small piece of paper, no handwriting, just a printed line. Just 7 words. Don't be here tomorrow evening. Please. The same voice as the voicemail? The same unseen messenger? Or someone else entirely? I didn't know. But I believed the warning. Not because of the words, but because everything around me had already been telling me the same thing. I folded the paper with trembling fingers, tucked it into my pocket, and locked my door. My breath came shallow, but my mind sharpened with terrifying clarity. Tomorrow was the day everything would change. Tomorrow was the day the trap would close. Tomorrow was the day the danger would stop being hidden. The next day rose in a haze of pale gray light, the kind that made everything look colder, quieter, more distant. Somaiya sat on the edge of her bed long before dawn, unable to sleep, unable to breathe freely under the weight of what she knew. Tonight was the night she was supposed to disappear. The warning note felt heavy in her pocket, its folded edges soft from the number of times she had reread it. Don't be here tomorrow evening. Her mind replayed those words again and again until they became a drumbeat inside her chest. She needed a plan. She needed courage. She needed time, and time was the one thing she didn't have. She waited until the house stirred awake. Footsteps moved in the hallway. Doors creaked. Conversations murmured softly downstairs. Everything was happening the way it always did. Except now she could feel the lie beneath every routine. At breakfast, she acted calm, quiet, distant. Her spoon moved through her bowl mechanically, though she couldn't bring herself to swallow a single bite. Someone asked if she was okay. She nodded without looking up. She didn't dare meet their eyes, didn't dare let them see the fear that might give her away. Around noon, she slipped out of the house under the excuse of needing fresh air. But as she walked down the street, she sensed someone watching her from the window. She kept walking anyway, resisting the urge to look back. Her steps led her farther than usual, past the familiar blocks, past the corner shop, past the boundaries of ordinary days. She reached a small park, empty except for the wind pushing through the trees. She sat on a bench, gripping her phone, thinking hard, breathing harder. Could she call someone? Would they believe her? Would they help? She opened her contacts. Her thumb hovered over a teacher's number, then over a friend's, then over emergency services. Each option felt both promising and dangerous. What if someone checked her phone? What if she alerted the wrong person? What if this made everything worse? She locked the screen again. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Fast, deliberate. Her heart jumped. She turned, ready to run, but it wasn't who she expected. A stranger. A middle-aged woman with a kind face and tired eyes. She looked at Somaiya for a long moment before quietly sitting on the bench beside her. Not too close, but close enough to be intentional. "You don't know me," the woman said softly. "But I know you. I've been trying to warn you." Somaiya froze. It was her, the voice from the voicemail. The warning she wasn't meant to ignore. "I can't stay," the woman murmured, glancing behind her as if afraid of being seen. "But listen carefully. You need to leave before evening. Not later. Before." Somaiya's lips parted, but no sound came out. Fear and relief collided in her chest. "Why?" she whispered. The woman swallowed, her eyes heavy with something like regret. "Because they've made plans without you, and tonight they're going to act." Somaiya's breath trembled. "What kind of plans?" The woman shook her head. "I can't say more. I shouldn't say even this. Just go. Find a safe place. Tell someone you trust. Don't return home tonight." A gust of wind pushed through the trees, rustling dried leaves across the pavement. The world felt painfully still. "Who are you?" Somaiya whispered. The woman hesitated. "Someone who's seen what's happening. Someone who knows how these things end if no one speaks up." She stood abruptly, as if every second she remained was a risk. "Please," she begged quietly, "don't ignore this warning." And then she walked away fast, disappearing down the path before Somaiya could gather the courage to follow. Somaiya sat there, stunned, the air thick with dread. The truth was no longer hiding in shadows. Someone else knew. Someone else cared enough to risk everything to warn her. She wiped her trembling hands against her coat and stood up slowly. Whatever happened next, whatever she decided now. Somaiya spent the afternoon planning in fragments, scribbling notes on scraps of paper, memorizing routes, and watching the streets for any sign that someone had noticed her movements. Every shadow seemed to carry a warning, every passerby a hidden observer. She knew she couldn't go home, not tonight, Not ever again, if the warnings were real. And she couldn't wait for anyone else to act. Her backpack was packed with essentials: a charger, some cash, water, and a small notebook. Nothing heavy, nothing obvious. She tested the door quietly, listening for creaks or signs that someone was following her. Nothing. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She stepped into the street, heart pounding in sync with every footstep. Each corner brought new tension. Each glance over her shoulder quickened her pace. The ordinary world had become an obstacle course. Cars, neighbors, birds on wires, all silent witnesses to her flight. Halfway down the block, a figure appeared at the end of the street. She froze. A man, indistinct, lingering too long, eyes seemingly tracking her. Her pulse raced. Should she run? Should she hide? She ducked behind a parked car, breathing shallow, listening to the gravel under his slow steps. The man stopped. He waited. Then, unexpectedly, he turned and walked away. Relief and terror collided. She didn't know if he was friend or enemy, if he had been waiting to warn her or to trap her. There was no time to question it. Survival meant action, not speculation. Somaiya moved faster, weaving through side streets, checking her phone for messages. Nothing. The world felt suspended, waiting for her to make the next move. She thought of the warning woman in the park, her voice still ringing in her ears. Don't return home tonight. Not later. Before. She kept moving. The city, familiar during daylight walks, was now a maze. Each alley, each corner felt both protective and threatening. Shadows stretched long in the late afternoon sun, and every distant noise felt magnified. She realized with a cold clarity that the danger she had been sensing for weeks was no longer hidden in whispers. It was out in the open, testing her courage, testing her choices. By evening, she had reached a public library, a place full of people, full of eyes, and therefore full of safety. She sat in a corner, trying to blend into the mundane routine of study tables and soft whispers. Her thoughts raced, trying to piece together what might happen that night. She replayed every conversation, every argument, every glance that had made her uneasy. A sequence began to form, a pattern she had sensed but could not confirm. The danger wasn't random. It was planned, calculated, precise. And yet, despite all of the fear, a small spark of determination flared within her. She was no longer simply waiting. She was preparing. Every step she had taken that afternoon had been a rehearsal, a trial of her own resolve. She had crossed the first line leaving the house, but the real test was yet to come. The clock ticked toward evening, and the city lights began to flicker on. Somaiya's mind raced. Whoever had been plotting, whoever had been whispering, whoever had been watching, they expected her to be unprepared. The city had become a labyrinth of fear and survival. Somaiya moved cautiously, heart hammering, every sense sharpened to a painful clarity. The streets she had walked 1,000 times felt foreign, hostile, alive with the shadows of unseen watchers. Each step she took was both a rebellion and a calculated gamble. One wrong move, one overlooked shadow, and she could vanish without a trace. Her mind replayed the events of the past days, the warnings she had received, the whispers she had overheard. The documents, the restraining orders, the hushed arguments, they all painted a terrifying picture. And now, tonight, she was alone with it. No ally, no defender. Only herself and the weight of the danger closing in. As she passed an alley, she glimpsed movement, a figure standing just out of the dim lamplight, almost invisible. Her breath caught. Instinct told her to run, but she couldn't risk being careless. Slowly, she moved along the edge of the street, keeping her shadow against the wall, using every flicker of light to mask her presence. Memories of home, of family, of laughter and safety collided with the fear she felt now. This wasn't the world she knew. It was a battlefield designed around her, her choices, her life. The voice of the warning woman echoed in her mind. Don't return home tonight. Not later. Before. That single phrase had become her mantra, a guide through the darkness. She reached the edge of the familiar neighborhood and spotted a small, crowded cafe still open. People inside talked, laughed, unaware of the terror playing out just beyond the door. Somaiya's chest heaved with relief. Light, warmth, human presence. It was a fragile sanctuary, but it was enough. She stepped inside quietly, sliding into a corner seat, and for the first time that night, allowed herself to breathe. Her eyes scanned the room. Each person was a potential shield, a witness, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. But even as she tried to relax, she knew that danger was still out there. Whoever had been orchestrating the events, watching her every move, would not stop until they had what they wanted. She was still a target. Hours passed, the night stretching long and suffocating. Every shadow outside the cafe window, every passing car, made her heart race anew. She clutched her bag, her phone, every small possession that connected her to life beyond this terror. She realized the fight wasn't just about survival tonight. It was about reclaiming her future, her autonomy, her right to live without fear. Finally, when the first light of dawn began to bleed across the city, she felt a small but defiant surge of hope. The night hadn't broken her. She had navigated the darkness, avoided the traps, and reached a place where she could think, plan, and take the next steps toward safety. But the edge of darkness lingered in her mind. She knew the night had changed everything, and the challenges ahead would be even greater. Tonight had proven one undeniable truth. Danger could be everywhere, but courage was stronger. As she stepped outside into the soft, pale morning, she understood the lesson etched into every fear, every shadow, every whispered warning. Survival depended on vigilance, courage, and the will to act when the world tried to control you. And Somaiya Begum was determined that she would act. Thank you for listening. If you ever feel unsafe or are struggling with a difficult situation, please remember there are resources available to help. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or a professional service. You are not alone. The morning light was deceptive. It softened the sharp edges of the city, masking the danger that still lurked behind familiar streets. I walked with a careful, deliberate pace, every step measured, every sense on high alert. The night had been survived, but survival alone was not enough. I had to reclaim my life, confront the truth, and face the shadows that had stalked me for so long. My thoughts drifted to the warnings, the strange encounters, the messages I had received. Each one had been a thread in a web I was only just beginning to untangle. I realized now that my independence, the freedom I had fought so hard to attain, had drawn both admiration and envy. But it had also drawn malice danger that came from the very people I had once been told I could trust. As I navigated the streets, I felt the eyes of the world on me. Not literally, but in the echoes of my own mind, in the memories of the house, the arguments, the suppressed threats. Every step reminded me that the life I had taken for granted, the normalcy, the family, the home, had been a fragile illusion. I had been thrust into a reality where courage and vigilance were the currency of survival. I paused at a corner, my gaze sweeping the street. The city, alive with morning activity, seemed completely oblivious to the storm I had weathered. But I knew the storm was not over. Whoever had plotted against me had underestimated my resolve. The darkness of the past night had proven one immutable truth. I would not be silenced. I would not be trapped. In my mind, I replayed the past months, the moments of fear, the decisions that had saved my life, the warnings I had received. Each had been a test, each a crucible shaping the woman I had become. I felt a hardening in my chest, a steely determination. The danger of the past could not define me. It could not dictate my future. My path now was clear. I would seek justice, speak the truth, and ensure that the forces that sought to control me could never again harm me or anyone like me. I would become a voice for those silenced, a shield for those threatened, a beacon for those navigating shadows similar to mine. And as I walked toward the rising sun, I understood that the fight for survival was only the beginning. The real battle was for the life I had earned, the autonomy I had fought for, and the legacy I would leave behind. My story was no longer about fear. It was about courage, resilience, and the unyielding refusal to surrender to darkness. That night, the city had tested me. Tomorrow, I would reclaim it. The courtroom was silent, except for the measured footsteps of the officials and the quiet shuffle of papers. This was the stage where truth and justice would finally collide. Though I was still recovering from the trauma of the past weeks, I understood that this was more than just a trial. It was the reckoning that my courage had demanded. Every piece of evidence, every statement, every recording was a testament to my resilience, a narrative I had survived long enough to witness unfold. As the jury deliberated, I felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. I had learned that fear could paralyze, but courage could redefine the impossible. The very people who had once sought to control me were now constrained by law, accountable for the darkness they had tried to impose. Each revelation in court peeled back the layers of betrayal, exposing the calculated violence and the hidden threats that had defined the days leading to my disappearance. When the verdict was finally read, the weight of justice was almost surreal. The sentence, a life term with a minimum of 25 years, was more than a legal conclusion. It was a symbolic restoration of balance. I understood that while it could never undo the horrors I had endured, it affirmed one essential truth: courage and determination could triumph, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As I left the courtroom, the morning sun breaking across the city streets, I felt an unexpected clarity. My life, though scarred by betrayal and loss, now carried a purpose that was larger than fear. The resilience that had carried me through darkness could now serve others, a beacon for those facing similar threats. I realized that my story, my survival, my defiance, my pursuit of justice was more than personal. It was a moral compass, a lesson in bravery, a testament to the unyielding human spirit. In the end, the moral was unmistakable. Even when surrounded by shadows, when faced with betrayal by those closest to you, the courage to act, the will to survive, and the resolve to reclaim your life are more powerful than any force meant to control or destroy. My journey through terror and uncertainty had forged a legacy, not of fear, but of relentless bravery, of resilience, and of hope that no darkness can permanently silence those who dare to stand. My story would live on, a reminder to the world that the light of courage, once ignited, cannot be extinguished, and that justice, though delayed, is never truly denied to those who refuse to yield. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous situation or struggling with their mental health, please know that help is available. There are resources and people who want to support you. You are not alone, and reaching out is a sign of strength. The case may be closed, but Crimology never sleeps. Like and subscribe at Join Crimology, and step deeper into the dark with us.